How you doing today, Brian? Today we had your friend Shirley Hayes on.
Yeah.
You want to let us in about a little bit of the insights and your favorite parts of the conversation today?
You bet. Well, part of what I love about Shirley is she's not bashful in any of the information that she puts forward. And we had, I think, a very open and candid conversation about diversity in the workplace, which is something that it's a theme that we see culturally. Just on a routine basis now, and it seems to be part of the public conversation. So I'm personally really thankful that Shirley got to be a representative with us on the program today. She's so articulate, and she's had a great professional career in broadcast media herself. So even just listening to her voice is incredibly soothing.
It has same broadcast presence as you do there, Brian. The late night DJ voice. Just made for radio. The perfect dictation and pronunciations of everything where I don't. But
well, and I love that she calls herself a chief magnetic guru. Also, I think it says a lot about her personality. But it was great, just kind of covering topics ranging from the history of what's happened in broadcast media, particularly in radio, and evolution of satellite radio, internet radio. Let's talk a lot about just the changes and the technology from analog to digital in that field, but then really broadened it out into conversations that I think are incredibly relevant, both for us socially as well as in the workplace. When it comes to women in the professional workspace in particular, but just diversity in general. So I'm thrilled that Shirley got to join us today.
Awesome. With that, let's just step out and let everyone listen.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Lead.exe. I'm Brian Comerford in Denver, Colorado.
And I'm Nick Lozano in Washington, D.C.
And today we're thrilled to be joined by our special guest, Shirley Hayes, who has one of the most unique titles that I've ever come across. She is Chief Magnetic Guru, which I think is a first for me. But, I can't wait to learn more from you about what that means, Shirley.
And just when you thought you'd heard it all, I pop into your life. Well, it's first of all, thanks for letting me sit down and have a chat with you guys. I really appreciate it. This should be a lot of fun. And if it isn't, I'm going to post about it on LinkedIn. So there you go.
All right, pressure's on.
You've been warned. We've been warned,
You've
Brian.
been warned.
All right. Keep it fun or else.
There you go.
Well, Shirley, like me, we both share a background in broadcast media, going back a few years, and
good one.
In fact, sort of starting out in the same place on the FM airwaves and moving into more of the digital broadcast medium. For myself, internet radio ended up being a big part of the 1990s for me. And I know that you really helped forge some pioneering paths with some of the program direction work that you did for XM satellite radio. What kind of got you into broadcast and what's kept you in it for as long as you've been involved doing it?
I actually got into it by accident. My college roommate, she wanted to go into broadcast journalism. And I, at the time, was driving my parents completely crazy because every other week I was changing my major. And they were like, please figure it out. It's costing us money here. So she came back to the dorm room one day and she said, a radio station, it was a campus station, it was a commercial station, was going to do a contest to write in 25 words or less why you wanted to be a disc jockey. And I said, oh, okay, you're going to do that? She said, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. So when she left the room, I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, I got nothing else to do. So I just wrote up something and made it up. I counted up the words. Honestly, I said, okay, that's at least 25. and I sent it in and didn't think any more about it, and got a call a couple of weeks later about 5 a.m. The morning guy called and says, "Is this Shirley Hayes?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You won the contest." And I said, "What
That's
contest?" The Be a DJ contest. Can you come down right now? You're supposed to be on my show. Didn't you get my messages? I'm like, no. Where are you? Who are you? I'd never listened, didn't have any idea. And I got down there and I'm sitting there and he gave me some copy. He said, well, okay, well, do you want to be on radio? I said, no, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here. And he says, well, here, read this. Okay. And I started reading it. He said, no, you have to wait till I turn on the mic. I'm like, oh, okay. Turns on the mic and I start reading it. And when he closes the mic, he goes, you really should think about doing this. I said, oh, okay. And the first thing I fell in love with really was the production side and creating the stuff. I didn't really care about being a disc jockey at that time. And my parents, they weren't too crazy about it either. And I called and said, hey, I know what I want to do. I want to do radio. And my mother goes, oh, that's nice. And my dad is going, ugh. You can't get a job with that. Like, oh. But long story short, that career went on for 20 plus years.
That's so cool. So when you say that you really got into the production side, talk to us a little bit about that. What was it that kind of caught you?
Back in the olden days, that's when you still had a razor blade and some reel-to-reel tape.
Yes.
And I was fascinated that you could record any kind of sound. You could create pictures with audio and then cut them up and put them together and create a new story. And I just thought that was just amazing. And I would spend hours in there just, pushing buttons and cutting this and doing that. And it was awesome to me. I love that.
Nick, aren't you sorry that you haven't learned how to do all of that?
I've done audio production, but that's normally a digital audio workstation.
Yeah,
done a small amount of actual tape razor blade work in the 90s, but I wasn't getting paid to do it. So
what's interesting though is even with those audio production tools, the techniques and the approaches that are implicit in the tools, they're still most of the same ones that we used back in the day with tape, razor, and a wax pencil.
Yeah, I would say now, Brian, you and I were talking about this earlier, that music's very loud these days. It's mixed very loud. So, but sorry, Shirley, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm right there with you with that. But I think for Christmas, Brian, you should get Nick, find an old reel-to-reel player on eBay, get him some razor blades and a grease pencil. And see how much you can do with that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I am in my 30th year of broadcast and started off very much in the same place, reel to reel. That was where it was at, creating carts. I got really fast at doing it. I was really good at layering in a lot of different voices and production techniques, and that really greased the skids for me to have a very lucrative career doing commercial production.
Awesome.
Because ironically, a lot of other people, in the stations that I was working at, they weren't interested in it. They wanted to be the on-air personality. They wanted to be doing all of the broadcast announcing, and they didn't really care about all the mechanics that went into the commercial production, which is kind of like what you're saying, Shirley. I really gravitated towards that. And, over the years, seeing the evolution of those tools into things like SoundForge and, Audacity. I mean, you've seen all of these, tools that have emerged over time that really, when you look at what they're doing, they have taken the same type of approach that we would typically use with a razor, right? To cut a piece of tape.
It's the same thing. Yeah, exactly. And I was actually thrilled when digital editing came on the scene. I just thought, oh man, I was just like a kid in a candy store. That was just like, this is so cool. But there's something that you mentioned, and I lost my train of thought. But okay, we'll come back to that. Carry on. This is what you have to look forward to, Nick.
That's right. Well, I still do community radio production. So believe it or not, there are still reel-to-reel tape machines. And I did actually have one of the younger DJs ask me once, do you know what these are for? Because I don't think you'd ever actually seen them running. So the idea that they could be used for something, I think, kind of eluded him.
Well, my cousin's, I think he's 8 years old, and she has this huge vinyl collection. And he pulled one out one day and he said, wow, this is like the biggest CD I've ever seen.
Where do you find a player this size?
Exactly. He was fascinated. And then when she actually showed him a turntable, he's all in now. It's like, he loves it. He thinks it's just cool. But
well, it's funny, because Nick and I were just talking about production dynamics with audio production and how, particularly with digital mastering tools, now there's just a lot of opportunity to quickly push every sound to its maximum possible volume, which does not give you a lot of dynamic range in what you're working with. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where, we're kind of caught between two worlds right now, because there's been this whole movement gravitating towards 180 gram virgin vinyl, and lots of people, buying vinyl, and that's their preferred recording medium now. And then there's this whole other side of digital audio production where the appreciation of all those analog acoustics that I think are inherent in vinyl end up being blown out, because it's easy to just throw a pre-built filter onto an audio track and suddenly maximize everything that's there.
Yeah. It takes the fun out of it. I mean, it's kind of twofold for me. I love the techie side of things, but then there's some old school things that you just don't want to mess with. Let's just leave that part alone. But time goes on. So.
Well, and I think part of being, in it for the long haul, it's also what gives you some of that perspective, where you can have the appreciation for having a sense of curation, right, about those things that you're bringing together.
Oh, I agree, 100%. I remember when XM first started, the coolest thing. And I remember when I went in for the interview, I still had to wear a hard hat because they were still building the studios. And Dave Logan, and it was the best interview ever. He said, just wear what you wear every day. I had a sweatshirt and a t-shirt on and some jeans, and puts a hard hat on, takes me down to the production floor. They're hammering and shows me around, tells me what the goal is, tells me what the vision is of what they want to do. And I'm all ready with my speech, because, you're ready for that one, what can you bring to the table, and tell me about yourself, and where do you see yourself here? We get back to his office. He sits down. He goes, and here's the thing about the stock options. And I'm going, okay. And I'm ready for the big questions. And he goes, so you want to work here? I wasn't ready for that one. And I said, I already know your background, and I know what you've done. And that was the best interview. Of course, I took it. But the fun thing about that environment was the technology. You would, the production floor. I mean, when you get off the elevator, it looks like the Starship Enterprise, broadcast ops, and all of the machinery. And there were 70 studios, and there was a recording studio that could hold a 40-piece orchestra, and all of these computers and systems. And I was just like, wow, I love this. It made going to work not feel like work. It was really a lot of fun. And all of the things that we got to learn on the technical side, it was just phenomenal. It was just an amazing time. And I remember after a while you get comfortable. We used to do this thing when we'd bring artists in, or if we had to do interviews, we would always take them to the most boring parts of the building first. Take them to where everybody would sit, the lunchroom and all of that. And they were like looking at their watch like, really? One artist in particular, Mick Fleetwood, I had to interview him, and I go down to get him, and he's looking not happy to be there. Just one of those days, I guess. So, we go to the boring floors, and then I take him down to the production floor. And as soon as the doors open, it was like, it's like all these lights started going on. You can almost see him flickering around in his head, and he's grinning from ear to ear. He's moving around, and he's just nonstop chatter. And it was, let me see this and let me see that. He totally relaxed. All that technology just grabbed him. And so it wasn't just, really cool for us, but it was always cool even for the musicians who, been out there forever. And it surprised a lot of them. It was always pretty cool. But when it came to the reason we're here, women and technology, back then, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was a pretty huge programming department because there was, at the time, 100 channels. So if there were 50 or 60 program directors, about 5 of us were women. And when it came to the board of directors and middle and upper management, it was dominated by men. You can imagine the environment was a bit of the wild, wild west in there. With all that testosterone in there, it was interesting. It made for some very interesting moments. Our IT department was all male, and all of the production guys, which Lee Abrams called the audio animators, which I always thought was a brilliant title for production guys, they were all male. And I don't know what that ratio is now, and I hope it's much better, but that wasn't the exception. I mean, even terrestrial radio stations, I've only known 2 at the time female chief engineers. But even then they had, they caught a lot of issues from male general managers. Like, can you really do this? Are you sure? Or I'm like, why wouldn't you be able to do it? It was just always this subtleness about the ability of a woman to do those kinds of things, to execute on the technical side. For me, I thought that was always strange. I don't look at someone and think, well, can they do this? I just assume that you can, because I know I can't. So you're the expert. So, do what you do. But there was a lot of that back then. And I think it still goes on industry wise, not just in radio, but we know it goes on in other sectors. And the tech industry is trying to make that correction. And I think it was, you can correct me on this, but I think it was Amazon that had the issue with their AI going through the resumes, and they figured it out that it was actually eliminating women based on the way it was set up. And I guess that had been going on for over a year or so before somebody realized, oh, this is a problem.
Wow.
So, as technologically advanced as we've become, we still seem to be fumbling along here when it comes to women and diversity in the workplace. It still is a conversation that we keep having, but it seems to still be limping along.
So let me ask you a question about that, because it's interesting. You led into your story about your interview process at XM, and that it was, it was pretty much here's the place, here's the role. Do you want to come on board? So to a degree, it sounds like there was a welcomeness and an openness when you first got the gig, but then you found yourself in an environment that was, incredibly top heavy with men in the workplace. So talk to us a little bit about that. What do you think there was an openness and there just wasn't talent, or were there other obstacles, or was it just there was an openness to you? What do you think contributed to that?
To the openness or the lopsidedness of the numbers, or
just the fact that it seemed like the opportunity was an open door for you, and yet once you found yourself at the organization, it obviously hadn't been an open door for a lot of other females in the workplace.
I think there's two parts to that. One part is, I think a lot of women probably did not apply in the numbers that men did, because I think then, and it probably still goes on now, especially probably more so then, a lot of women weren't prepared for it. Second of all, and I say that because the women that I had worked with up to that point and after that, they all wanted to be on air. And I've been in situations where I would go to a female colleague and say, listen, she was on air, and say, let me show you some technical stuff, because you need to be able to do all of this stuff. Make yourself more valuable. And the pushback was unbelievable. I just want to be on the air, I said, you can be on the air, but just know how to do this stuff. So I think some of it is fear of not knowing what to expect. Am I good enough? Do I have the skills to get in there and do this? And that's kind of unfortunate, because it was also an environment that was a positive learning environment. They knew they had a lot of technology that a lot of us had not seen before. So they took steps to make sure we were trained on every system that we had to deal with, because there were quite a few we had to deal with on a daily basis. So I think that's one side of it. The other, as far as the openness of the interview, they knew from my resume what I had done. They had talked to people, they knew all that part. So there was no reason to question whether or not I could do the job. The issues came when you have a bunch of wonderful guys who are not used to working around women, or they forget they're around women, and they do things and say things that are inappropriate. And then you go to them and say that's inappropriate. And some of them just look at you dumbfounded, like, I have no idea why that's inappropriate. So there was a lot of that that had to be tamed, for lack of a better word. But it for somebody else, it might make them uncomfortable. And there were some things that happened along those lines that should not have happened. But there were people who just were not used to acting in a certain way, and certainly not around women. But it got dealt with, and things got much better after that.
Well, here we are at I think the pinnacle of the Me Too movement.
Yes.
Right. So I think that part of what might be, quote unquote, getting better about it is that there's an awareness, and there's an awareness on both sides of the gender equation. There's also a social awareness, where now the conversation is actually starting to take place.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right?
I would agree with that, and I'm happy that that's happening. There are some. There's still some uneasiness, because now you have a lot of, and some of them are my friends who have said, I'm all for women being equal and all this kind of stuff. But some of them express, but I don't know what to say now. I don't know if I can say this. I've even had a friend call me and say, can I say this? Is this going to be offensive? I'm just going, dude. It's.
I mean, I can understand that. Brian and I were talking to a guy who was a CIO somewhere probably out in the Midwest, right, Brian? And he was talking about when he interviews, females for technology type positions that are highly technical, he tends to think that he's not as tough on them as he is males, where he's like, okay, well, I see you're on this team. He's like, where if I see a male, he's like, well, tell me what you did on that role. Were you actually doing something on that team, or were you just part of that team? Tell me exactly what you did, right? So I think we've kind of seen that spur across in technology too, right, Brian? Where it's a typically male-dominated field, and we're trying to make sure that we're being more self-aware with everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think we're kind of inching through a period of integration where there's still some uncertainty about what's the right way to behave. I think that there's kind of depending on how much integration you've needed to undertake as an individual in your own personality might actually be one of the barriers to actually having more of that open kind of mindset, so that things do flow a lot more naturally versus kind of like in your example, Nick, where someone who's in a hiring position feels like they have to interact differently because they're dealing with someone of a different gender. It's I think it's a turning point where, again, the fact that we're in the midst of a lot of what's going on with the Me Too movement, it's just one indicator of it. Shirley, you and I had chatted a little bit, just exchanging messages around the Moment of Lift, the new book that has come out by Melinda Gates, where she talks about Bonnie Ross, who is a female leader at Microsoft, and in fact leads the development team for the most popular video game that Microsoft has ever put out there, called Halo. And she talks specifically around, I think her quote is, diversity attracts diversity. And part of what that means, my interpretation at least, is when you have a plurality of opinions and a plurality of perspectives, it makes your workforce stronger. It's part of what has contributed to making Halo the best of the video games, in terms of sales that Microsoft has ever had, because it's not just this narrow cast set of perspectives on what creates that entire experience for people. It's got a really holistic and integrated perspective. So I'm kind of curious, you've been in the workforce long enough to have gone through some of your own experiences and seen some of those transitions. Talk to us a little bit about, where you see that getting better, or is it, are there areas where it's stagnating?
Well, just as a side note, I'm a Grand Theft Auto kind of girl, so Halo.
I was never a big Halo fan myself.
Oh,
anyway,
cool.
So it's okay.
Fist bump to you, Nick. Fist bump there. Well, I think on one hand it's getting better. And I think because it's being forced to get better. But anytime you force that, sometimes the results aren't always the way you want them to be. But the other part of that spectrum is, I think women have to be louder about these things. They have to, if you're already in a technical position, wherever you are, you can't just let things just roll as they go. You've got to let your voice be heard. And if, someone questions your ability to do something, we can't have an emotional breakdown or meltdown or whatever. Because sometimes, and I'm a woman, I'm I know my species, we can take things a little differently. We can be a little bit more emotional about things, not because we're just emotional creatures. Okay, maybe we are. But sometimes we just have to take a step back, look at the situation and say, okay, is this what I really think it is, or is this something else that's happening? And I say that because, we're stereotyped that, we're going to go off and cry. And I've seen quite a few guys have emotional meltdowns. They just go in the corner somewhere. But all kidding aside, I really do think seriously that we just have to be more vocal within the workplace itself, and don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to call something out. A lot of times women feel like they don't have the support to do that. And especially if you're in an environment where, as a woman, you are the minority numbers wise, that's very difficult to find someone to give you that support. Sometimes our male counterparts don't know how to do that. They don't know what to say, or they don't want to get involved, or they're not sure what to do. And a lot of times there isn't a protocol in place for that. There's just nothing there. So she may feel so alone in that situation that nothing ever changes. And the next thing you know, she's resigning and moving on to someplace else.
Yeah. That's. I think all of those things are, just very strong points to consider. I've certainly seen my share of men who have had their own emotional breakdowns, sometimes very overtly and right in front of me. But I think it goes back to what you're saying in terms of women need to be confident in being louder, right? I think men have been in just in general a very entitled position for so long that they're more comfortable with kind of anything goes.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah. It's an environment that they're used to. But also, when a woman is okay with being louder and speaking her mind and calling things out, she's not looked at the same way. Instead of, she's not looked at as just a strong leader. No, she's, not that. So that's something that has to change.
I completely agree with you. I know that when, a male leadership figure is kind of aggressive and assertive, they're like, oh, he's a strong leader. He really knows what he wants, and he just gets straight to the point. And when it's a female, it's like, oh man, I don't know what her problem is. She's, she's just, always on top of my case. She always has something to complain about. So I can definitely always, see that. And I myself, I try to be aware of that in my everyday, handling of people. I try to handle the people that work with me exactly the same, no matter what. And I think you brought up a good point too, was having those uncomfortable conversations right away, right before they get way out of control, which I think are helpful too. And if we're talking to our staff and our people that we're leading, it should be okay for them to have uncomfortable conversations with us without fear of any type of recourse or revenge or something against them. If there's an issue, I know, at least for me, as a leader, I'd rather somebody just speak up and, let me know. Maybe we don't need to air it out in front of everybody, but, sometimes I might say something that I'm not quite aware of. And I can definitely get you working in a male-dominated field before, because I worked in the restaurant industry before I ever came to technology. And if you want to talk about a male-dominated industry, if anyone's worked in a restaurant, they know it's like working with a bunch of 15-year-old boys. So I can totally get it, and I understand where you're coming from. But is there anything that we can do, maybe as male leaders, to kind of put ourselves in those shoes or make ourselves more aware? I mean, for me, I'm not a female. I can't, take your exact perspective. But is there anything I should be aware of that, that I can make it easier for a transition, or something that I should be doing?
That's a great question. I think I think a lot of guys just need to chill out. It's a woman. It's not an alien from another planet. Sometimes the expectations or maybe preconceived notions that some men have about women can really drive these issues. I can remember I was a program director for a radio station in a large metropolitan city. That's all I'm going to say. And we were in a sales meeting. And one of the salesmen happened to be a guy. He presented some idea about some kind of promotion he wanted to do. And I'm looking at it. We've got this whiteboard up there, and I'm checking it out and, taking it in and so on and so forth. Long story short, I get back to my office. My general manager calls me, and he's laughing. He can barely finish his sentence. And I'm going, what's up? He said, come to my office. I get to his office. I said, what's going on? The sales guy came into his office after the meeting. He's ranting and raving, and it's like, this just isn't fair. And my GM goes, what's not fair? I can't read her. She had no emotion whatsoever. I don't know if she liked my idea or not. And that's just not fair. I'm sitting, and this guy is just losing his mind. And my GM said, well, what was she supposed to do? I don't know. They always have some kind of emotion, but she had nothing. I mean, this guy was just done.
Wow.
Because I wasn't showing, I don't know what I was supposed to show. I should have twirled or something? I don't know. But in his mind, I just wasn't, he expected something different because I was a woman. And that didn't happen. And from that point on, this guy barely had anything to say to me. He just was just totally freaked out. And my GM told him, get over yourself. I had a great GM. But he thought it was hysterical that this guy was freaking out like that. But it just kind of brings home even something as simple as that. Some guys, some men, maybe they're not used to working with women, or they have this idea of how a woman should react to something. I don't know. That was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced, and on that level. But I got to imagine, well, I do know that some other things like that do happen to other people and to other women. But getting back to when it comes to the technology side of things, I've had my ability called into question, not because I did something wrong before it even started. Are you sure you can do this? Do you know how to do this? And I'm like, dude, I've been doing this as long as you have. This isn't new. And some guys just never come around. They just never change that point of view. And that's unfortunate because there's so much we can share. There's so much we can learn from each other. There's so much more we can do. But not to get, I want to get back to your question, Nick, about what can you do? I think it sounds like you're already doing it. You have to keep an open mind. You have to remember that even though she is she's a human being, and you treat that person, that female, the same way you would anybody else. Don't question her skill set because she's a woman. Don't offend her by saying, "Sweetie, are you sure you can do this?" I hate that. Don't do the sweetie or honey thing with.
Yeah, I'd never do that. I was like, instantly, as soon as you said that, I was like, whoa, I would never say that.
Well, nowadays you're much more keenly aware. I'm like, oh, wait, no. Back in the day, there was a lot of honey, sweetie, dear going on, and it was annoying then. It's annoying now. But now, I think people kind of tiptoe around things a lot. And but as a man, you should not have to do that either. You should not have to tiptoe around. It really is about having, as you said earlier, conversations, having the right conversations, not being afraid to have those conversations. And if you're not sure, ask. Just ask.
Mm-hmm. The book that I'm reading right now is Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness.
Excellent.
And Brene Brown was actually recommended to me by one of our prior guests. And, her position on authenticity, I think is just, it's just one of the best.
She's amazing.
Sort of presentations on authenticity that I've ever read. And in this particular book, part of what I love about it is it's so perfectly timed for what we're going through in America as a culture currently, especially when you look at the political environment, you see what's happened with the Me Too movement, and it all ties back to exactly what you're saying, Shirley. It's the conversations, it's the self-awareness. No one has to be timid in their approach with anything, but we have to be authentic in asking the right questions so that we can engage in genuine conversations.
Absolutely.
That's the only way we can actually get to a point of integration with each
Okay,
other.
you get a fist bump, Brian. You get one. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool.
I love it.
That was
Thank
so
you.
cool and so true. That's I couldn't have said that better. That's it. And sometimes we have to get out of our own heads. We can overthink things on both sides. And
Sure.
we just have to, and it's okay to make a mistake. Well, sometimes it can be costly, but you want to, but I think if your approach is genuine, and that goes back to being authentic, it makes a huge difference. It makes a really huge difference, because there are some women that have been so jaded because over and over and over again they've had to deal with this, that now that outer layer is so tough now. Now they're not trusting anything or anybody. And as genuine as you might be, or as authentic as you might be, she may go, nope. So, and that's just from years of being pushed back. And some people just, they won't be able to come out of that. So unfortunately, that's the byproduct of the things we've experienced, both as women and as a minority. I'm what the double minority here, and I've experienced it from being a woman and as a minority. But maybe because of the way I was raised, I don't hold on to that kind of stuff. I take it for what it is,
Sure.
and you work it out and you keep going.
Well, I may have an advantage in that, I grew up thinking I had minority status in my own family. Anyone who knew my mother and knows me, would say that I definitely take after my mother. But I wasn't from Brooklyn like she was, so that was the first strike against me. But, that's part of what gave her, a very tough, no nonsense outer shell. And, very, very sweet, loving person. But there was never a moment in my life that I was going to get away with anything with her. And, certainly not ever disrespecting a woman. That would never have flown. So for that, I'm thankful. I think it's part of what, through my professional career has also helped me work so well with a lot of strong female leaders. Again, I've had sort of that maybe a bit of an outlier, kind of professional experience, because most of my mentors through my professional life have actually been women. And so I think it may have helped, all those things combined, I think may have helped shape me to have a slightly perspective than what others of my gender could be wrestling with at this point in their own professional careers.
It's obvious that both of you have had amazing women in your life in some form or fashion. I can tell that by the way you speak about women and about those, and how you are, Nick, as you were saying, as a leader, and how you treat people, and Brian, your openness to read somebody like Brene Brown is a testament to that. So maybe you guys should just lead the way.
We're trying.
And show them how it's done, because it's and it's refreshing. It really is refreshing. So maybe you can start a new trend in a big way.
I think for me, I think Ed Catmull, who was the CEO and one of the founders of Pixar, has like the best quote. It's like, geez, I'm gonna have to look this up or else I'll butcher it. It's be authentic and consistent, and the trust will come. And I think a lot of times what's missing is just that authenticity that you were talking about, right? And being, candid with people, having the tough conversations, and, trust is like a piece of paper, right? And when you crumple it all up, it's hard to make that paper flat the same way it was
Absolutely.
again. And, that's the way I see it. As long as we're, just, have trust in each other, to have those tough conversations, and bring up issues when they seem like they're a problem. I have no problem having anybody on my staff, whether they're an alien. I just really don't care. I just really want, people who work for me who are here to, do good work while they're there, whether they're a man, woman, trans, gender, whatever else we want to throw into it. I just want a great team of people who want to build great things and do great things.
Now, if we can duplicate that mindset, we're onto something here. Yeah.
Well, you at least got one more up there, and
absolutely.
Brian. So
that goes without saying. That goes without saying. I do think though that and I love that happens. Whenever there's how should I put this? Whenever there's I try to stay out of the politics of things, but whenever there's a mindset that's counterproductive to the growth of us all, Madison Avenue takes it and turns it around on them. I have never seen so much diversity on TV commercials now ever in my entire life.
Yeah.
And and not just with people of color, but everything mixed up, because it's real life. That's what's going on in real life. But it's at a level that I've never seen it before. And I think that's great because so many people, a lot of their experiences, depending on where you are in your life and where you live, that's as close as they're going to get to those situations, is what they see on television. And the more they see it, the more normal it becomes to them. And it's not such a, stare, oh, what is that kind of thing. And even those, there's a commercial, I can't remember, it's an online school, I think. It's an animated, a woman, she is working in a factory, the computers take over, and then she eventually is the IT.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like a University of Phoenix commercial, I think. I know what you're talking about.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's a great idea. It's a great way to include women in that industry. But I think that's an industry where there's probably a higher number on the tech side, wouldn't you say? The women are pretty prevalent in that area now.
Yeah, I think more so than ever before. And I think a lot of it is, it's with the amount of training that is now available. Also, I think it's one of those things that has just helped create a level set of the understanding that all of this is teachable. People are not born engineers. There are certainly people who have more of a proclivity towards that engineering mindset. But when you've got, platforms as versatile as something like Salesforce, where, the one of the lead, points for the versatility of the platform is click, not code, right? Then suddenly everyone has a different openness, I think, to, hey, maybe this is something that I can do. So I think there's just a huge confluence of people who, are really interested in approaching technology today than certainly I've ever seen in the past. And, even my son, who's 11 years old, he comes home, he talks about programming as if it's just, it's like learning.
Right.
It's just something everybody
does. That is so amazing. That it's so, they're so nonchalant because it's just so normal. I remember when I was maybe 14, and I'm really dating myself, and Nick, you will have absolutely no connection to this whatsoever.
To what, being 14?
No.
Yeah, come on. You can't be a day past 25.
Oh, I love this guy. It was, I remember saving up my allowance to buy a color computer from Radio Shack, and they had these little cartridges. That was the programming.
Well, I loved Radio Shack, but
Oh, yeah.
And I bought this little computer, and I remember writing a little program, because I told my mother, listen, I'm going to write you a program so that you can play the lottery, which she didn't play. She said, is that going to help me win? I said, I don't know, but it can pick some, numbers at random, and maybe you can win. And she said, oh, okay. Of course, she didn't win anything, but I remember being so fascinated with technology, and I started buying all kinds of little computers, and anything that came out, I just had to have it. I wanted to see what it could do and how it worked. And thank God for my parents who didn't mind their daughter taking things apart, because I needed to see how they worked. And their thing was, just put it back together because we may need to use that later. I'm like, okay. They,
I was the same way. Is that a Betamax? No one has a Betamax. I'll just tear this apart.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
I think you and I would have been great fans, just ripping things apart and probably never putting them back together.
So we can use these parts for something else. Let's just put this over there. But I think more young women need to be exposed to technology earlier, and not be afraid of it later. So what's my thing?
Well, I have a friend who produces episodes of Sesame Street Creative Workshop, and he and I were just talking just a couple weeks ago. It was really a reflection of your comment, Shirley, about just the diversity that Madison Avenue is helping to drive in content now. My friend said, it's really turning into Sesame Street culture everywhere that you look in the media. And then the funny thing is, he didn't even need to explain it. I knew exactly what he meant. That is a reflection of what you actually see in America. It's not this homogenized, very one world perspective any longer. And every time I feel jaded about the direction things are going, I reflect back on what the Egyptians referred to as the three epochs, right? The first was the age of Osiris, or the man, the father figure, right? Sorry, let me reverse that. The first was the age of Isis, right? The matriarch. And that's reflected in, tribal society and a network of, interdependent culture. And then that was subsumed by the father, right? The patriarchal, the very unilateral sort of perspective. And then the third epoch is the age of Horus, right? Who's the child of Isis and Osiris. And that's the age of discovery, or of integration and synergy. And we've actually entered into that third epoch according to their calendar, right? So, I mean, that's inspiring to me to think that a lot of what may seem at times like we're taking a step backward, it's really just helping to elevate those things to the point of dialogue in our culture. And once we get those things out into the open, that's where we can actually pivot and transform.
Absolutely. Wow. That was
Where do
deep,
you learn
dude.
this stuff, Brian?
I'm thinking the same thing, Nick. I'm going, this dude is deep.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh, geez, man, he just broke some Dr. Phil down on us there.
I made a mental note, Google. I'm like, wow. Okay. Wow, that's pretty deep.
Well, I'll lean on what my wife often says, which is I'm a fountain of useless information.
I wouldn't say that much. She just like Wikipedia or something. Just broke that out.
I know. I'm like,
air.
wow.
Whoa, man.
Okay.
It's like, that's a great line. Right.
Well, Shirley, can I ask, have we had fun? Has this been fun?
This was just fabulous, and I thank you so much for inviting me to come along and hang out with you guys. Appreciate it.
Sure. And then I just got one question we ask all our guests here. So do you have a favorite book that you read, or that you like to gift, or maybe a piece of media or something that sticks out to you that's kind of had an influence on you?
Look, my Kindle is smoking at this point. I can't. It's not one book, and for me, I mean, books have always been a huge part of my life. Huge. Even I remember when I was about 7 or 8 years. Do I have time for this?
No, go for it. You have all the time you need.
I was about maybe 7 or 8 years old, and I heard that the school district was going to burn some old books because, you know, they were falling apart and whatnot. And I overheard my parents talking about it. And I don't remember having a meltdown, but my mother said, you had a meltdown, because I couldn't fathom them getting rid of a book. Rid of them. She said, sure. And I had a red wagon. School was only 2 blocks away. And I took that wagon all the way down there. I filled it up, went home. I made about 5 or 6 trips. I had about 100 books when I was done. And I remember sitting in the middle of my room just going, oh man, whew. They didn't burn the books. I just, oh. So that being said, there's always been some kind of book in each part of my life that has had an effect on me, that has caused, you know, something that has helped me do something. So it's hard to pick just one book.
Sure. No. Is there anyone that sticks out just to mind you that you'd probably recommend for our listeners to listen to or read?
Okay. Well, there's one book that's just on personal development. The other one is more of the technical thing. So which one do you want?
Sure. Either one. Whichever you prefer.
Algorithms to Live By. It's the computer science of human decisions. That book is so amazing. If it's like tech marries psychology and just plain old human stuff. It is the most amazing read I've come across in a very long time. I love it.
I'll have to check that one out.
Highly recommend.
Seems pretty
it.
interesting.
You'll be blown away. It's very thought-provoking.
Just check that out. And I've just got one comment here. You're talking about the books, and that drives me back to, you know, that the library was going to burn these books because they didn't have, was it space or something like that? You were saying, and so in Detroit, maybe in 2014 or something like that, the library has a problem with funding. You know, obviously because, you know, they had the recession there, and they closed a lot of the, you know, auto plants there. So the library was having a hard time dealing with funding and getting money just to fund the public libraries there. So then they went out on this rogue campaign, and they're like, we're going to do this anti-library campaign where we're going to burn the books. We're going to do a social media campaign to burn the books, come out to this book burning festival. And basically they went on this whole social media campaign with zero money. This was just like lower level people at a library somewhere in Detroit. And they're like, oh, you know, how ironic, come out to the book burning library and get a book bag to burn these books in. And it's just like done this whole thing. And what they basically wound up doing was getting this social media huge following. People were like, no, books are information. There's knowledge in there. We can't burn those. And it took just some kind of miraculous event like that. And I think, Brian, I've shown that at one of our events there to show just the power of information and social media itself. But I digress. It just reminded me of that. So just look it up, you know, Detroit Library book burning, and you'll get, they did a whole little video about how they went through and did it.
It's brilliant.
Just brilliant.
That's wow. That was great.
Yeah.
How do you turn the public perception around on an issue that should be important to people, and, you know, you're simultaneously being told, no, well, there's no funding available for you. We've got far more important things to do. And, you know, that's the power of that story to me, is they said, okay, you want to see how unimportant this is? Let's elevate it.
Let's take it to 11.
That was brilliant. Yeah. Kudos. That was great.
Yeah. So if you get a chance, just check that out. I think, you know, just you telling me that story, I think you would enjoy it. It's on YouTube.
Absolutely.
You can find it.
YouTube is one of my best friends. So I will definitely check that out.
You mentioned a personal growth book as well. Is there another one?
Yes,
that you wanted
thank
to
you for mentioning that. The Power of Habits.
Oh yeah,
That
I know that one. Yep.
that is it kind of for me when my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that kind of got me into wanting to learn more about the human brain, and then of course that went from that to psychology and human behavior and what's going on when we're making decisions and all those kinds of things. And so when I came across that book, I just think it's a great book that teaches you how to work with your brain as opposed to against it. I think most people work against it, and that's why they have so many issues. But when you learn how the brain works and how those things are and how habits are created, it can change things. Literally, it's like magic. And it's a fascinating read. I love that book. One of my favorites.
Well, thank you for both those recommendations. And thank you for taking the time to join us. Really glad that we were able to coordinate this, and your insights, they're thought-provoking and, just very welcome, I think, for a lot of what Nick and I love to showcase on this program. So really appreciate you being here with us today.
Yes, we really appreciate it. And if people are looking for you, where can they find you? Are you on the interwebs, the social media?
I live on the dark web. I'm kidding. No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Tor browsers and
that's I look. That's an interesting. That's another show, guys. There
you can
go.
find it on the dark web.
I spend all of my when it comes to social media, I'm a LinkedIn girl. I don't do Facebook. Nothing against Facebook. It's just not my thing. I love LinkedIn, and that's where you can find me. And you can message me there. You can connect with me, and that's where I am. So find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. We'll make sure we post a link to your LinkedIn page in our show notes.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you guys having me on. This was a blast. Really, I really enjoyed you guys. Anybody else would probably think the subject matter, these guys are going to be boring. It's just you're going to be looking at your watch, wondering how long is this going to last. But that wasn't the case at all. It was, and I'm kidding with you. I knew it was going to be, great. So, all right.
No, you just had to handle with me muting. For some reason in DC, it's a heavy ambulance police activity day, so I was constantly muting my computer.
Well, having worked there before, yeah. I mean, the district is so tiny, but big at the same time. There can be a lot going on. So, and I love technology. My business partners, we're all in different parts of the world when we're meeting, which is so cool. And then you guys are with Denver, the district, and I'm in Atlanta.
Brian's Denver.
I love technology. Yeah. It really allows you to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time, really. So there you go.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for being.
Let's do this again sometime. Thanks, guys. Bye.
For sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Shirley.